from the City of Presidents. It's the All About Quincy podcast. This is your host, John Melley. Join me as we explore the history, hidden gems, and highlight the businesses with great stories that all tell the tale why Quincy, Massachusetts is a great place to live. Hey there, it's John. How are you? Thanks for spending time with me today. I do appreciate it. Welcome back for another episode of the All About Quincy podcast. We've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. Before we get to today's topic, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, throwmydogabone.com. It's a way for you to support both this podcast and the Forever Home New England Dog Rescue. You know, we're dog lovers here at the All About Quincy podcast, and we got our rescue dog, Trudy, from Forever Home New England Dog Rescue, and she is just the best. Here's how Throw My Dog a Bone works. Go to the All About Quincy podcast site and click the Throw My Dog a Bone link at the top of the page. Or you can go to throwmydogabone.com. When you get there, you're going to see a picture of Trudy, and you can buy 1, 5, 10, or even 20 digital dog bones. They are not real dog bones. It's a metaphor. And 20% of all the proceeds after bank processing fees will be donated to Forever Home New England Dog Rescue. And the rest is going to be used to support this podcast. So go to allaboutquincypodcast.com, click the Throw My Dog a Bone link at the top of the page, and buy 1, 5, 10, or even some people have purchased 20 digital dog bones at throwmydogabone.com. Throwmydogabone.com, supporting content creators and helping dogs find loving homes. Speaking of dogs, Quinn and Trudy tag teamed a squirrel this morning, and sorry, squirrel. What is it with this weather? We've gone from March to August within about 48 hours. This is my favorite time of year because everything is in bloom. And for those who deal with allergies, my apologies. I'm actually feeling them a little bit this year. I'm fortunate. I don't really get affected by pollen, but this year, it's pretty strong. The cars are covered in it. I'm really excited about this episode. My guest today is Lieutenant Chris Barry from the Quincy Fire Department, and I want to thank my friend Doug Trude, who's also in the Quincy Fire Department, for connecting me with Lieutenant Chris Barry. So Doug, thank you. But before we get to my conversation, I have to give a few shout-outs, as promised, from our Where in Quincy contest on our Instagram account at All About Quincy Podcast. About every week or so, I put up a mystery photo, where in Quincy, and the folks who correctly answer where the picture's taken, I give shout-outs in the podcast episode. So if you're not following us on Instagram, go to at All About Quincy Podcast on Instagram and give us a follow. We do a lot of fun things like this. So shout-outs up. First of all, credit where credit is due. The person who provided this picture for this version of Where in Quincy, the Instagram handle is at Beauty in the Eye of the Beholder. Beautiful photographs. Want to thank them for sending so many pictures. We're going to be using a bunch of their pictures in future contests as well. And that is at Beauty in the Eye, letter I, of the Beholder. And also the South Shore Camera Club for participating in this fun contest on our Instagram account at All About Quincy Podcast. So the people who guessed correctly, this picture was taken of the Thomas Crane Public Library. We've got winners of E. Malvesti and a really cool Instagram handle, Mrs. Cape Cod Cookie Jar, and Wendy Adams Fine Art Photography. Thanks for listening to the show, and thanks for participating on our Where in Quincy contest on our Instagram account. So, let's get to my conversation with Lieutenant Chris Barry from the Quincy Fire Department. Welcome back to the program. As I said at the beginning of the episode, my guest today is Lieutenant Chris Barry from the Quincy Fire Department. Chris, I'm really honored to have you on the show. I want to talk to you about your story, but I also want you to talk about the Quincy Fire Department, its mission, which I believe is probably broader than just putting out fires. But that's the kind of stuff we want to talk about today. And I want to thank the chief and whomever gave you permission to speak on behalf of the fire department today, because I know that's important. And we definitely want to talk about what you and the Quincy Fire Department do for the city and maybe surprise our listeners. Some stuff that people don't know. But welcome to the All About Quincy podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. I want you to know what a pleasure it is to be here with you today and how grateful I am for the opportunity to hopefully shine a bright light on all the good things that we're doing here in the City of Presidents at the Quincy Fire Department. I do want to thank Chief Joseph C. Jackson Jr., our leader, for allowing me the opportunity to come in and speak with you very candidly today. This opportunity doesn't come very often, and we really like to seize it when it comes along.
That's
We'll
great.
get to talk about some of the things that make us who we are and to maybe surprise some people when they learn about all of the things that we do.
Before we talk about the department, though, I want to ask you, if you don't mind, what was it about being a firefighter? Tell us your story. Did you grow up in Quincy?
Sure. I grew up in the Wallaston section of the city of Quincy, and I think, like many folks of my vintage, we grew up with an infatuation with firefighters and the good work of the fire department in general. Based upon some early experiences with my family, I came from a family of police officers.
Okay.
But always was more interested in the fire service. And, my parents were generally, tolerated, I would say. And I can remember some Christmas visits to the fire station in Boston to see Santa. So that's always going to impress on a young boy.
Yeah.
And then watching shows like Emergency growing up, I kind of knew at an early age that there was a call to service within me and that it was going to be something that was very central to me. And as I went through my development and my adolescence and into college, I never really let go of that desire to do community service. Whether it was at Boston College High School over in Dorchester, where I attended, and being involved in the Key Club over there, or during my college life, or at the Boston Ambulance Squad as a volunteer back in the 1990s.
Wow.
I just always kept very connected to this, and I have very strong, positive early memories of St. Anne's School in Wallaston and the custodial staff. I was very fortunate to get to meet who were Quincy firefighters at the time.
Wow.
And they made a big impression upon me, and they always had time to talk about it. But those guys were larger than life. They were heroes. I think I was imbued with a desire to do this at a very early age.
That's great. You mentioned Emergency. I loved that show.
Mm-hmm.
Chet with his chili and bad
right. and some great comedy timing, right? Absolutely. There was so much to learn about that. And I think that it kind of merged two interests with me. I've always had a strong interest in the emergency medical services side of the job that we do.
Yeah.
And, I cut my teeth in places like Brewster Ambulance Service, working in the town of Dedham EMS, and as a volunteer at the Boston Ambulance Squad, and then later at Boston Emergency Medical Services. And that's a connection I'm very proud of. And it's a very central part of my fire service career because we do so much emergency medical services. That's the biggest part of what we do on our job right now. And I just thought Emergency was like, wow, this is, a real interesting opportunity to impact people's lives. And as dramatic as it was, I loved it. And it just really sang to me.
A lot of people don't know about that show, but it was really ahead of its time in terms of, I think from that genre, ER and all these medical dramas. And there really hasn't been anything like that up until recently, maybe. And I can't really even think of anything. But that and Adam 12, they were two really big TV shows. So how long have you been with the Quincy Fire Department?
So I'm in my 29th year here in Quincy, but I've been involved in the fire service for much longer, since 1987 as a freshman at Middlebury College up in Middlebury, Vermont. So the career kind of runs deep in me now, which is kind of funny as I get to this point in my lifetime. It went by in a flash of light. It's just been so very quick.
I know the feeling. The Quincy Fire Department, you refer to it as the fire service. Is it the Quincy Fire Department, or should I be saying Quincy Fire Service? What's accurate here?
No, we're just one element of the fire service in general, but it's the Quincy Fire Department here in the city of Quincy.
Okay. I think what I'm also approaching this from, Lieutenant, is are there things that the public can also be doing to be safer as a community, or without meddling and getting in the way? Are there things in the city that people can do that helps first responders such as yourself, not just the fire department, but maybe the ambulance service and the police department? But paint us a big picture of what you do, and then maybe share some, geez, I didn't know that the fire department did that.
So this is an interesting story, and the roots of the current Quincy Fire Department really can be traced back into the 1600s with the first recorded house fire in the city of Quincy, which was, of course, at the time, part of the town of Braintree, referred to as the Old Town. But Thomas Morton's home in Marymount actually burnt to the ground. So one of the most early kind of primal events that occurred in the city of Quincy's fire history is an event of a rather historic figure and a house fire. And over time, there was always the recognition to protect people from the scourge of fire. And a lot of that had to do with common construction at the time and the expansion of the community up until the point where Quincy splintered off from Braintree and became the city we know today.
Yeah.
So there's a lengthier history that I think people appreciate. I think that some of the key takeaways that we always like to talk about when we have the opportunity to talk about safety hinge around safety in your home first, monthly checks of your smoke detectors and your carbon monoxide detectors to make sure that the battery backups are functioning and those are in working order. And we really want people to have current working detectors in their home because generally people fail to understand that it's the smoke that will usually get people in trouble and contributes to the number of fatalities greater than the fire itself does, so to speak. So the products of combustion, toxic gases that smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors detect are your primary defense in your home against a fire emergency turning into a very untoward event. And we don't ever want that to happen. So I'll always remind people to check their detectors. I'll also remind people to make sure that they practice exit drills in their home and just to make sure that they have a plan for how to get out. And a second plan, if their primary plan isn't going to work out because of conditions in their home, should they ever have a fire. So those would be two messages that I think would be very on point that we'd want to talk about. In terms of helping us, always giving complete information to the 911 operator when you call in case of an emergency. Having visible address numbers on your home is a huge help, and leaving a light on at nighttime would really help us to be able to find your house as quickly as possible. And those are kind of key considerations I always like to remind people of because I think that slips through the cracks a little bit, and people tend to gloss over simple remedies and solutions that contribute to a positive outcome. Lastly, there's one big thing, John. Sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to leave you as we're getting into warm weather, is safety on the water. And I'll tie that into an event that happened over this past weekend where we had a very successful water rescue in the Swanham neighborhood of the city of Quincy. And I want to remind people that they make sure to always have a personal flotation device, a life jacket, to swim where there are lifeguards in areas that are okay to swim at, and to use extra caution this time of year on the water because the sea temperature is still very cold, about 53 degrees.
It's cold. Yeah, that it takes a while for that North Atlantic Ocean to warm up.
It does.
It's probably warmer in the fall than it is right now, isn't it?
Right. As you get towards the end of the year, as the currents come up this way and we get more warm days and you have sunshine and better weather, it definitely warms up. But most of the year, the water is fairly cold here.
Yeah, so. It sure is. That's why they call it the polar plunge or something like that, right? Right. Right. What do you think is the, I don't want to say biggest, but the most common mistake? You may have said it already, but what's the most common mistake that you see where you're out and about and you go, that's not a good situation. That could lead to something bad. I'm always fascinated and enjoy speaking with experts because whatever you're an expert in, you view the world through a set of eyes with a whole bunch of information that the person who isn't an expert in that just isn't, they don't know, they can't see it. But what is it that you see most frequently that could be a bad situation?
I think generally, and I think this may be in addition to being a career firefighter and emergency medical technician, but also being a parent, is I see that people generally don't often maintain enough of a level of situational awareness of what's going on around them. Whether that's in time of an emergency and you're not realizing the gravity of a situation and the need to call help early on, or maybe it's a situation that, an act a second or two earlier, if you had been quick to recognize it for the gravity that it's actually happening, that you could have a better outcome. And I see that often. Sometimes it's things as simple as, when you go to a hotel and you stay somewhere new overnight, just making sure you know how to get to the stairwells and you know not to take an elevator at night. Or if you're in a place of assembly, how would I get out quickly and safely if there was an emergency? And those are probably the general terms. And those are the things I'm constantly reminding my now adult children about, just don't ever abdicate your personal safety to anyone else when you can actually be on the front foot and be looking around and always have a plan. And that there's comfort in a plan because if an emergency does happen, it'll reduce your shock and surprise factor and you'll be able to respond and react to it much better in a much more measured capacity. And I would think that I would share that with you.
A couple of things. I'm kind of familiar with a few of the terms that you used, but situational awareness Explain to folks what that means.
So I boiled it down to its simplest terms, and just as in the most layman terms possible, it's actually reading a situation or an event for the level of import or gravity that it actually is. So it's seeing things in the right light and understanding that it's a serious situation. And that's the chief thing. Because sometimes I think we tend to have a little bit of a suspension of disbelief that something can be happening. Like, oh, that's only a small fire in my home. Or, well, they're only playing with some fireworks. What could possibly happen? Or, I don't have to worry about how I store oily rags, gasoline, etc. I think that you really just need to have a better awareness and just, make sure that you're always kind of performing a little bit of a self-check, if you will, and that things are actually as innocuous, if you're seeing it that way, as it appears, and that, things are as advertised. And that's what I always remind people about when I talk about situational awareness.
There's a concept called normalcy bias. You must be aware of that.
Yes.
What that means for people listening who might not know what that means is just because something different is happening. Perfect example. And I will give you this, and I want you to take this and run with it everywhere you want to go with it, because I think it's important and I see it too many times. I remember years ago, I was at my place of employment and the fire alarm went off. Mm-hmm. And everybody just sort of stood around like, oh, wow, the fire alarm is going off. And now I have a personal experience. I was not in the building at the time, but I owned a condo in Arlington, mm-hmm. and there was a fire. And unfortunately, it was a serious fire and someone actually passed away. Mm-hmm. And a third of the units were just wiped out with fire. But normalcy bias is like, well, this is different. This can't be dangerous. The fire alarm's going off. And I'm like, the fire alarm's going off. Get out of the building. And, right. People were actually looking at me out the windows, kind of going, what's John doing? And I'm like, looking back at them going, what are you doing?
Right.
Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% correct. We encounter it frequently. I was working in overtime in the north end of the city a couple of weeks ago, and we had an investigation for an alarm activation in a building. Something obviously triggered a very sensitive alarm to function in the manner in which it was designed. And we got there, and there were about 20 people in a high rise who actually left. And, that always surprises me a little bit. And I will always tell people that, who will always leave is people who've been in a fire because they know the risk. But sometimes we tend to develop a contempt for the risk from fire. And we've become kind of immune to understanding that, we should be a little more respectful, for lack of a better term, about that. But we see that all the time. That's a common thing, unfortunately. I even hear it in surrounding communities. I just think that we're so conditioned now that, that's okay. That's probably just cooking, or, this is probably just a false alarm, or, something going on like that. And I think it lowers people's threshold for appreciation of what it could actually represent.
So this is John speaking, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the fire department in any
Sure.
way. But if you hear the fire alarm go off, leave the building. I don't care if it's raining,
by all means,
or bad weather, or 3:00 in the morning. You're worth too much. The world will be so sad without you. You need to get out of the building. And if you're uncomfortable for 15 minutes, so be it.
Please leave the building and close the door to your unit behind you, especially if the fire is in your unit. That's one of the biggest things you can do to help us be able to control a fire event quickly should you experience one in your home, in a multi-occupancy dwelling like a high-rise apartment building or garden apartment structure. Those are some key considerations. If you leave in a hurry and leave your door open, we're probably going to encounter a fire that's rapidly growing and expanding, and it's going to be a much more serious event. So those would be a couple of key pieces of advice that I could 100% get behind and agree with.
Are there any citywide messages that you want to share on behalf of the department?
Yes, we really want to tell people that, your fire department is here for you. We're a resource. And for years, people, I don't think, have adequately understood that, we are a multi-hazard response agency. So what does that really mean? That means that not only do we do fires, but we also do emergency medical aid. It's the largest part of our job right now. We respond to hazardous materials incidents We do an aggressive inspection program to help people safe ahead of time. And those are just like a couple of quick things that we do. We're also involved in technical rescue for things like building collapse or people who like to climb at the quarries, high and low angle rescue, construction accidents that involve trenches in the street or confined spaces in industry. We are your answer point for that. And we respond to all these, we train for these, and we take these responsibilities very seriously. And thanks to a great partnership that's been articulated through our Chief Jackson, through the mayor of the city, Thomas Koch, and through our union president, we've been really able to build up to have adequate resources, training, and capabilities. And we're grateful to everyone who lives and visits the city and supports us, and especially those who pay taxes. And I would want them to know that they're getting a lot for their investment in us. And we're about returning that investment by being prepared and being capable. And you're very well protected in the city of Quincy.
I'm assuming the answer to this is yes, but there must be some ongoing and continuing training for all the members of staff.
Always. So training never ends here. And we're doing training daily, whether it's at the company level or it's more sophisticated department-wide training. We have our heavy rescue company leaving to train at different places that will present challenges in the technical rescue disciplines that they can then bring those solutions back to our city to be better prepared. We're in Deer Island and Winthrop, training with our partners in the fire service from the Boston area to get better at what we do. We're at the Massachusetts Port Authority Fire Department at Logan Airport to use their flammable liquid simulator so we can get better at extinguishing fires involving flammable liquids like gasoline. So we're always training, we're always examining new technology, and we're always trying to improve. It's a constant total quality improvement culture here at the fire department now.
On a calendar year, for the average member of the force, how much of their year is spent on training?
Oh my gosh. So without, going and pulling an individual record.
Yeah.
A little bit of it will depend where you're involved. So if you're involved at a technical rescue company, you have responsibilities, or you're a hazardous materials tech, it will be over. But we're in the hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
And that's how that goes. Because, these certifications don't end with the granting of a certificate and a handshake. There is constant maintenance to be done. So we're always doing that. That just never ends.
Nobody makes an appointment for an emergency.
No. If only we knew. Imagine how prepared we could be.
Right. What's one of the biggest things that would surprise the average citizen of Quincy that the Quincy Fire Department does?
I think they would be very surprised at how much we are in the background preparing for disaster. I think that they kind of are aware of it, but I don't think they'd understand the depth to which that training goes. So not only for natural disasters, but unfortunately for man-made ones, including risks that people may not be really thinking about, but things like the risk from terrorism.
Yeah.
So, Quincy is a focal point in transportation. There's critical infrastructure here. We have a National Historic Park. We have a refinery on the waterfront. So there's a lot of risk here in the city that gets managed every day behind the scenes. And there's a number of layers to that onion, if you will, about the planning that goes into that. So I think if they ever knew just how much we work with our partners in law enforcement and EMS to prepare for the unthinkable, they might be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, you almost have to put the hat on and say, if I was going to do this,
You have to.
You have to do it. And a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but we would be negligent probably if we didn't on some level plan for it.
I absolutely agree. And I think that we're basically in the worst day business of planning for people's worst days. So we're not, risk adverse here, so to speak. We're kind of risk aware, and that, we really, really try to measure things, and then we prioritize, and then we build our community fire protection plan based upon the risk that we see through that prioritization process. So there's a lot that goes into this.
What is your favorite part of your job?
Helping people, hands down. I would have to say that's the reason I get into it. That hasn't changed in 29 years here in Quincy. But, the times when we've been able to make a difference have really been among probably the highlights of my life, not just my career.
Sure.
But helping people is genuinely, that's the greatest reward. I mentioned I was going to share some good work from this past weekend.
Please, yeah.
But we had companies in the north end of our city at the Squantum Point Park assist in a water rescue that was definitely going to have a very poor outcome had we not had a rapid entry into the 911 system and a rapid response with prepared people to the incident scene to effect a water rescue with 2 people in the water. And those are the kind of things that I really think about.
So you saved a couple of lives.
Not personally, but our guys did. And I want to talk about that because I think it's so important to tell people about the investment you've made in your tax dollars pays off in moments like this.
Please.
You don't get any second chances. This is, we're always practicing so that we can perform at a very, very high level. And we're very, very tough on ourselves. We do a lot of after action and, we look critically
at how by that after action, Lieutenant. Sorry.
We look constantly at our response to incidents and we look to see what went well, what didn't go so well, what we need to do to improve, and how to go about making that improvement, whether it's identifying ways to train, whether it's identifying new equipment purchases, or whether it's maybe realizing, hey, this is a risk that we need to really re-examine because it poses a greater threat. So we do that constantly. We're a tough audience. We've got a lot of type A personalities here who are in the business to help people and to get it right the first time, every time. So these are the kind of things that, we really look at. And those are the things that I think that pressure we place on ourselves to perform at a high level reveals itself when someone calls 911 and they're having the worst day of their life and they get a great response with skilled hands and, the best outcome possible.
There's so much that goes into it. I mean, it's like when those trucks are coming, people know help's on the way.
Absolutely.
And on people's worst day, there's the reassurance. And I don't want to use the word comfort, but, oh, good, I'm not alone.
I think there is comfort in there. And I don't think you're wrong for using that. And I think that when taxpayers make an investment, they have a right to expect excellent performance.
Right.
And, we are able to take that seriously because we're supported by local government here and that they provide us with the means to do our job at a very high level. So maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about what do you get when you call for help? So you get a very well-trained, very well-equipped, skilled response capability to your house, whether you're calling for a medical emergency, whether you're calling for a fire in your home, whether you have someone who's been trapped in a motor vehicle collision or in the water and needs immediate assistance. That's the trust that the public has placed in us. And we take that very serious.
Sure.
This is an ultra hazardous profession still to this day. It still remains personnel intervention, despite all the advances in technology. It is personnel intensive, and it requires you to maintain a high level of vigilance. And, that's something that we take very, very seriously. And that when we go out the door, we know that the public comes first. We feel very strongly about that, and we'll never change from that. That's not a pathway that we would ever divert from. So we hope that the public knows that.
Well, yeah, if you start to just do the math, like you just said, it's a personnel intensive business. It has to be. It's humans working and helping humans. It's not robots. I mean, there's probably some robotics involved, but it's a person behind it. But my point is that it's a 24/7, 365 business. Half jokingly said, emergencies don't make appointments. They happen anytime. And that means you've got to be staffed up 24/7, 365.
It's funny, in researching this for today, because I wanted to be very prepared, I went back and I got a copy of the late Lieutenant Robert Mood's seminal story of the Quincy Fire Department, which was published for the bicentennial in 1976.
Oh, cool.
And there was a very, very early pointer back in history towards that. It's never just the one incident, but Quincy has a habit of stacking several simultaneous. And it was funny that it was written back very early in early editions of the Quincy Patriot. So one of the first, newspapers in the area. But they pointed back towards that. And I always say, anyone can handle one. Right. It's when you're rolling 3 or 4 deep in the city and we have a lot going on, where you really have your mettle tested. So those are the preparations, and that's why we really have benefited from strong support, both in the area of equipment, personnel, and training from Mayor Koch and from Chief Jackson. And I can't say that enough.
That's great.
But we want you to know we're good stewards of your investment from the public. If you're a taxpayer here and you're wondering what you get, we do take all of this very seriously to put out a great product, because we're not making widgets, so you can't really see what we're doing. You have to know that this is kind of a contingency based investment, and that you have to have some faith in us that we will perform, and we'll perform admirably when an emergency happens.
You'd rather have it and not need it than not have it when you need it.
I think that's exactly the story of the American fire service over, some of the more well-known disasters over the years.
Yeah.
And, in Quincy, we've supported both. We've taken assistance into the city when we've needed it. We've also supported going back as far as the Great Boston Fire, the Bellflower Street conflagration in the 60s in Dorchester, the Coconut Grove Fire. We sent our department ambulance to.
Wow.
So we've been a resource, and we've really, we've tried to be that, and to really remain the sharp tip of the spear.
Just to remind everyone, my guest today is Lieutenant Chris Barry from the Quincy Fire Department, and we're having a really good conversation about all of the resources and services that the Quincy Fire Department provides to the citizens of Quincy and also the general area. We talked a little bit about making sure that smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, the batteries, all of those things are functioning. Monthly, you recommend checking them?
Yes.
What about fire extinguishers, Lieutenant? Should people have fire extinguishers in their home? I have my own bias, and I'll share that after you answer. I think you should have a fire extinguisher, but I'm wondering, are there places that you would recommend placing them?
We would tell you that we're never going to say anything against a fire extinguisher, because obviously early extinguishment in the hands of a skilled operator is going to have a great outcome.
Okay.
The kitchen area will always be good, somewhere where you can access it easily, preferably on your way out of the kitchen. So if that condition's worsened, you're leaving. You know what I mean? You're not putting yourself in harm's way, and getting an extinguisher doesn't place you between the fire and a place of no refuge or exit. So those would be a couple of things. And I would also say that you need to be savvy with fire extinguishers about what model you're using and what you want to put out. So that, a stored pressure water extinguisher might be great for regular combustibles. Like, you might have trash outside, or you may have some burning leaves or something of that ilk, but that's not going to be your best bet in grease. It's not going to be your best bet in charged electrical equipment. And it's certainly not going to be your best bet on flammable fluids that, might be burning. So although we would never say no, we'd ask you to become an educated consumer and to look at something that's within your skill set and your ability to use effectively for the types of fires you may frequently encounter. I think the fire extinguisher, that's had a rebirth in the fire service. You'll see us with them on calls. We take them with us frequently on investigation type calls that we respond to in the city of Quincy. And an investigation is just a fancy way of saying we're answering an alarm in a building and we need to find out why this came in. But we try to have those, available to us. And we have many different types available to us in Quincy, including a special type of extinguisher that helps us control fires that occur in solar panels to control the production of electricity without damaging the solar panel. So we leave the homeowner in good condition after their emergency at their house, should they ever experience one involving a solar panel array. So that's just one use.
Wow.
Many different things that we can use, and there are many types of extinguishers now available. So I would definitely, suggest that. A quick rule of thumb is if you can ever remember that you want to use the word pass when you use a fire extinguisher, and that's pull the pin out of the extinguisher. You want to activate the handle, squeeze and sweep. And that's just a good reminder. And by sweep, we mean at the base of the flames.
Right.
So those are some things that you can get some more information on your own. But I'd advise people always to become educated about fire extinguishers. It's never a bad thing.
I keep one inside my bedroom, right by the bedroom door, in case I need to have something to fight my way out of the house.
Sure. And hopefully you never do. And your best defense there is sleep with your door closed, because that's been proven time and again that if you have a fire in another part of the home while you're sleeping, that the products of combustion and heat are kept at bay with a closed door wherever you sleep. So I'm going to definitely encourage you to do that.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have thought it would have been good to have the door open so it was easy exiting.
No, what we found out over the years as we've become more sophisticated is that the products of combustion, particularly the things that are found commonly in smoke and soot that occur in fires, are carcinogenic. They contain high amounts of carbon monoxide, which is a toxic gas. Yeah. And this is what really is the killer in fires. So if you can keep that stuff at bay, you're going to do much better.
Interesting. And then if you have to go out the window.
Right. And know that, an early 9/11 call with accurate information is going to get us coming very quickly to you.
Yeah.
And we're going to do everything in our power. When there's lives at stake, we're going to risk a lot to make the positive outcomes occur and to get in and get to people who are in harm's way.
What's your biggest frustration as a department?
Well, that's a very, very good question. I don't know that I've actually ever been asked that. So, frustration is kind of a loaded word in a way. I could give you a fairly good answer that's not, that's meant very sincerely. I think that we always would love to be able to do more, to train more, to be able to continue to be as prepared. And it's always a balancing act whenever you work in municipal government because there are limited resources. So we're always in competition for that. But in a world of infinite resources, that might be something I would lean on. We always want to have every opportunity to train, to acquire, every piece of technology we might like to have. Anything that we can have that's going to make our ability to do our jobs better. But again, it's competing priorities. And, that's kind of what I would talk about. I would be like, it's not a frustration. We get excellent support here. But I think if everyone should always be looking to look at things that they can improve at and how they can change and how we can continue to leverage technology and improvements in the fire service and bring them to bear for the people we're sworn to protect.
That's an interesting thing that you said. You're sworn to protect. You actually take an oath to be a member,
absolutely. Correct? Right. And, I think I alluded to it earlier when we said, we can be first up until the time the alarm goes off, and after that, the public comes first. That's one of the best things of the fire service, I think, is that we don't ever judge. You call for help, we're coming. And we're going to try our best with our expertise, our skill set to do as much as we can to help you. But that oath does require us to perform an ultra-hazardous job in dangerous conditions with limited information. And sometimes, there are going to be things that happen and there are going to be injuries. And, hopefully we never have to deal with a line of duty loss. But where people are in danger, that oath that we take when you come on the job and is taken very seriously. And perhaps firefighting is not for everyone. You have to be okay with that. And that you can't be thinking about that when we go out the door. You have to operate as safely as we can always, but you have to be prepared to risk a lot to save a lot. And that's one of the things that I think makes the fire service great.
That's cool. What I had when I asked that question about the frustration is more probably a personal frustration from a civilian's perspective. When you hear the sirens and you see the lights, pull over to the right or get the heck out of the way. I had a relative who was having a cardiac event and I was in the ambulance and the siren was going and it's like some people were just kind of moving.
And again,
someday that could be you or a loved one.
I think that, that really refers back upon that situational awareness. And I think that we are distracted as a society now. We have more access to means of communication, to entertainment, and, we've gotten away from being aware as drivers. We all know the hazards of what texting and driving can do, but even having music at a high level and, not being as present, that can have an effect. But if you can pull to the right and stop, that makes your reactions much more anticipatable, if you would. We can react and operate this very heavy vehicle that's filled with lifesavers and life-saving equipment in a much safer way when we know that you're going to do what we'd like you to do, which is pull to the right and stop.
Right. Maybe there's a listener out there who's interested in serving. What is the process? What are the requirements? What does somebody need to do to stick their toe in the water, if you will?
If they're interested, we're always going to encourage that. And maybe this is, it begins with a conversation and find out some more about, the profession, because it is a profession. This job requires more than just, the desire to be employed and earn a living. It goes beyond that.
Sure.
But the best way to do it is to sign up for a state civil service examination and take the test. And that's how everything, gets started for people. Obviously, we definitely look for quality candidates. There's an extensive background check that's done by our partners in law enforcement, an interview process, and we run our own fire academies. We're completing one that's graduating tomorrow. We'll have 24 members joining who are, firefighters on probation, building their first experiences in the fire service and heading out on a long career, hopefully, here serving the city's residents. So this is an exciting time, but those are the best things to do. That's what we really encourage folks to do.
You've been very generous with your time, Lieutenant. I want to thank you.
Been a pleasure.
Oh, good. If there's one thing that you want our listeners to come away with from our conversation, what would that be?
When you hear the fire alarms go off in your house, take them seriously. We ask you to have a plan on how to get out and to get out. Close your doors as you exit, and really, really don't go back in. We want you to get out and stay out. And those are the messages that we, really want to pass along. Check your smoke detectors, check your carbon monoxide detectors, do it monthly, and help us help you stay as safe as you can in your home.
And shovel out your hydrants.
Please. Well, though, we're looking out the window and better weather's coming.
Yeah.
Is always appreciated. If we don't have to search for it, we're doing a lot better.
Right. A lot of this comes from that personal experience. Like you said, the person who's going to leave when the fire alarm goes off is somebody who's been in a fire. And,
absolutely.
But stuff can happen. You're not special when it comes to emergencies, unfortunately.
We hope, honest to God, we really do hope to never meet you in the case of an emergency. We'd much rather see you at a ball game or at
the parade
or something. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do want you to know that we're appreciative of the investment that taxpayers make in our department, that we're good stewards of it, that we are prepared, we're constantly looking to improve, and that I feel you're well served. And I hope that most of the residents feel the same way.
Excellent.
Can I plug one upcoming event later in the summer?
Yeah.
So we have the Fire Department sponsored blood drive that's going to occur in late August. That's going to be in Quincy Point at the Four River Clubhouse, which the city owns. And I believe it's going to be 30 August. And that's a blood drive that's sponsored by the fire department. It's being led by one of our acting lieutenants up in the fire prevention division, acting Lieutenant Adam Dacey. And it's a great way, if you're capable and you're able to give blood, to connect with the community and hopefully save a life. Lifelong blood donor here. Take that very seriously. And that's another great way to give back. But that's something I definitely wanted to give a plug to. And fire prevention does a lot of good work. Our division is very busy. It's led by Captain Michael Kelley. And they just do a great job. So I just wanted to plug that event a little bit if I could. Absolutely.
No, I'm happy to do it. And if there are other things that the fire department wants to promote, like Fire Prevention Safety Month or something like that.
We have, that's in October. And again, it would be a great opportunity to do that as that grows near.
Well, open invitation to come back on the show. Before we leave, is there one story that really sticks out where you were just like, wow, I picked the right job?
Wow, that's a great question. You have a long career and you meet a lot of folks over this in a lot of different circumstances. But I think that there are several events over the years, things that have happened that we've responded to. I think some of the best memories are delivering babies.
Delivering babies?
That happened out in Squantum. That was kind of a great event. Our Engine 6 in Howe's Neck just had a repeat recently. And that's always fantastic because a lot of times we're so engaged in things that are teetering on the edge of life, and to see a new life come into the world is great. Some of the things that guys have done off duty have made me proud to be a member of this fire department. Firefighter Christopher Carthus on vacation in New Jersey saved a choking party recently. So we're always so glad to hear about those good events and be able to tell those stories. But I think personally, I will always look towards, events that we were able to do good things and save lives. We had a building collapse at the former Quincy shipyard property. Some of the acts of bravery that I saw by the people I worked with were amongst the greatest I've ever witnessed under untoward situations that, there were a lot of unknowns, and lives were definitely saved that day. So those are the things that I always look back with and, I'm most happy about.
That's right.
Anytime we've been able to save a life is a big thing. And,
like this past weekend.
Like this past weekend.
That's
and those guys down there, and to give a plug to Lieutenant Jeff Merlico at Ladder 5 and his crew, firefighter Eric Ely, firefighter Ray Waldron, Lieutenant Paul Deschler at Engine 7, firefighter Paul Ratty went into the water and swam a victim to a waiting boat, and firefighter John Coughlin. They just did an unbelievable job, and we were assisted by a bystander who was a member of the National Guard, who chose to get involved, and he was able to swim a victim over to a place where we were able to save them. And that was a great story. So
that's awesome.
Very happy.
That's the kind of stuff we want to showcase on this show. So, and Lieutenant, I just really want to thank you, first of all, for your service, 29 years of serving the city of Quincy.
My pleasure.
That's a vocation. And I'm sure, I want to thank you for taking the time. I really, really, really appreciate it, sir.
Thanks. It's been my pleasure. It's been my greatest honor to serve this city, this department, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the good work that's gone on here.
Well, that's it for this episode of the All About Quincy podcast. I want to thank you for listening. Check out the All About Quincy podcast on Instagram. That's a great way for you to connect with us. We are at All About Quincy podcast on Instagram. When you do, you're going to get an opportunity to sign up for our weekly Quincy Happenings e-newsletter. Every week, it's going to give you a handful of great events happening around Quincy so you can plan your schedules and make plans for the weekend or whatever, happening all around the city. So go there, get it for free. Just click the link at All About Quincy Podcast on Instagram, or you can sign up at allaboutquincypodcast.com. And remember, if you've got a great event coming up or you have a great guest that you think should be on the show, we want to know. Reach out to us at allaboutquincypodcast.com or send me a message through Instagram. We'll be back next week with more fun. In the meantime, thanks for listening.